Today, we are pleased to welcome to Jazz Zone Together one of our nation's standout music and jazz educators, Don Zentz. Don currently serves as Director of Jazz Studies, as well as a member of the band faculty at Douglas Anderson School of the Arts in Jacksonville, Florida. He has taught for over 30 years and has developed remarkable programs at every stop. Now it's my pleasure to bring Dick Dunscomb in to conduct the interview with Don. Dick, it's all yours.
Thank you, Bob. We've been waiting for this one. This guy is something special, and I'm proud to say I know him pretty well. So welcome, Don.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's really an important step for us. As you know, many of the jazz educators that are interested in jazz improving themselves listen to these interviews, and they better listen to this one real close, because this man has put himself among the best in the country time after time. So we'd like to start the interview by having you share with us how you came to study music and what led you to pursue music as your vocation.
Well, on my mom's side, I have a very strong Italian background, and they were all very passionate people. And needless to say, as part of the culture, music was always playing in the house, to the point of my grandparents sitting me down and making me listen to the Texaco Opera Hour on Saturday afternoons. And so that started it. What I recognized from listening to the opera, because I had no idea what they were saying, but I did recognize the passion and the intensity and what was being sung and what was being played in the music. And I was very drawn to that. Then my grandfather on Sunday afternoons would turn off the football games with all of my great uncles in the room so that I would watch Leonard Bernstein's Young People's Concert with the New York Phil. And Tullio and Emilio and Silvio, and my grandfather's name was Mario, they're saying, we got to watch Daryl LaMonaco with the Buffalo Bills. But he said, no, we're going to listen to this for an hour. And he would say, isn't that beautiful music, Don? So I was around music like that at a very, very young age. And then in Buffalo, since band was an indoor activity, we started beginning band in the third grade. And the elementary school had all the instruments, but since my last name started with a Z, all the trumpets were gone. I wanted to play the trumpet. My grandfather, who worked at the steel plant for 38 years, also was a gig musician on the weekends, saxophone and clarinet player. And so he had an old saxophone down in the basement. And when all the trumpets were gone, that's how I ended up playing the saxophone in the band. And in typical Italian work ethic, I was made to practice 2 or 3 hours a day from a very, very young age, because he would say, if you're ever going to get good at something, you have to work at it. And so I became very proficient because I was practicing 3 times, 4 times more than anybody else. Then my family moved to Ormond Beach, and there was no band program because everybody started in the 7th grade. I was in the 5th grade. And the best thing that happened out of that was that my mom got me private saxophone lessons. And I studied with an old pro from Chicago who had played with all the big bands. And he really got me going with the jazz area. And since my mom was paying $3 an hour for lessons, I was still practicing 3 hours a day. And I started making all county band and then all state band. And I remember being in the all county symphonic band and being right in the middle of the band playing saxophone and feeling the hair standing up on my arms during one of the pieces we were playing. And I said, boy, I want to be around this the rest of my life. And then as a high school student, my junior year in high school, I was on the Florida All-State Jazz Band, and a gentleman by the name of Rich Madison was the conductor. And I said, I want to be around this. I want to be a band director, and I want to make jazz my specialty area, kind of like what Rich did. And little did I know back then all that would transpire in the decades to come. But that's how I got into it. And once I got into teaching, even as a college student, when I had some private lesson students, I realized that I really enjoyed being involved with the development of the progress of others, maybe even more so than my own progress on the saxophone, but being involved in their development and seeing the sparkle in their eye when they were starting to get it and they knew they were getting better. And I've enjoyed that now for many, many, many years.
Wow, that's a great lineage to get to the place that you are today. And talking about your teaching experiences along the way in your career, let's touch on some of the milestone accomplishments and who were some of your mentors along the way.
Well, Rich Madison directed the All-State Band, and then my high school band director said, you know, Rich is going to be one of the main clinicians at this place called Valdosta State College. It's only 4 hours from Daytona. Why don't you consider going? So I went, and that's where I met Bob Greenhaw. And I ended up going to school at Valdosta State. And Bob became, you know, my primo mentor. And then I ended up in Jacksonville teaching at one of the premier high schools here in town. And it was right at the same time that Rich was starting the jazz program at UNF. And he called me one day and I thought he was still in Texas. I was so buried in my band room that I didn't even know he was starting a jazz program out at UNF. And he said he wanted me to teach saxophone for him as an adjunct. And then maybe something might come of that in terms of a full-time thing. And so I would go over there on Mondays because it was the only day after school that we didn't have any after school practice. And I would teach saxophone in Rich's office until midnight. I would get there early on Monday, so I would watch him rehearse the second jazz band there with notepad in hand. And so Rich Madison, most definitely one of my mentors. And then the gentleman that I student taught with at Valdosta High School, and then later served as his middle school band director, Mr. Joe David, up in Georgia. Joe really taught me how to run the band enterprise. He taught me how to communicate with kids, and he taught me how to care for kids. He was an incredible human being for sure.
So your instrument is saxophone, and I know I've watched you do clinics. Let's do a little clinic.
Okay.
What would you encourage the young band director who doesn't know a lot about saxophone to do with his section? Where would you start?
Well, I think with the saxophone, more so than any other instrument in the jazz band, you have to have the right setup. I really believe you have to have a classical concert setup in terms of mouthpiece, and you have to have a jazz setup. And so one of the first things I would do is I would get the saxophone players in the jazz band on these Van Doren V16 mouthpieces, A5s for the alto players, T7s for the tenor players, and then the B7 for the bari player. Those are high quality mouthpieces modeled after some of the vintage legendary mouthpieces of all time. And the V16 reeds go very, very well with those mouthpieces. And that's pretty much what all of my kids at Douglas Anderson are playing. And other places that I have taught since those mouthpieces have come out. The problem with the kids playing their C stars in the jazz bands is that they're overplaying them, they're pinning them. They don't have enough headroom to really put the pedal to the metal and contribute like the brass players are contributing. And when that happens, it just really exacerbates a lot of the pitch problems and other issues that we have on the saxophone when they're not using the right kind of jazz setup.
So you all that are listening better take this notice, because I'm telling you, every time I've ever heard his band, his saxophone section is incredible for high school kids They're absolutely amazing. And I asked him this question and have used it in all the clinics that I do today. And he's got a lot of things happening here that are really important, and the ability to pass it along to others. So your current program here at Douglas Anderson has become one of the most highly regarded programs in the nation. Share with us some of the secrets of that success and thoughts you might share with other educators trying to reach that level of success.
Well, one of our basic philosophies at DA is that we teach total musicianship. We don't have a jazz track or a jazz area. Jazz is an elective area within the band program. So, and I share this philosophy wholeheartedly with my colleagues at DA. I was never taught that you're either a jazzer or a classical musician, even as a saxophone player. And I love Bird as much as Beethoven. And that is a philosophy and a perspective that we share with the kids. Consequently, our players have really strong fundamentals because we come to it from a fundamental classical training. And then when we get them in the jazz band, they have good tone, they can play in tune. Our rhythm section players come from the bass player comes from the orchestra area where they study classical. The guitar player comes from the guitar area where they study classical. The piano players come from the piano area where they study classical. And we put all of that together, and we have a fundamentally sound jazz band as a result of our band program philosophy, with everything else happening around the symphonic band being the core of the program. So that's number one. I think you have to have that in mind. The other thing with jazz that I have been fortunate enough with Bob Greenhaw and Rich Madison and things that I've come up with on my own and things that you have shared with me, Dick, is bringing the abstract into the concrete. You know, we talk about swing and we talk about putting it in the pocket, and we have all these slang terms, and we have to really break it down for the kids so they know exactly what they need to be doing to try to get closer to the style. And I think so many directors do not do that, you know. And I got to tell you, nothing burns me more than when you're judging somewhere and the kids come out in sunglasses, because that is a total disrespect to our idiom and to all the work that everybody has ever done to bring respect to jazz. But, you know, I think we need to come to it bringing it into the tangible. So Bob Greenhaw always had this thing about swing style phrasing where it's all about the accent. He called it the power of the accent, where you accent first notes, last notes, high notes of a grouping, quarter notes or longer, upbeat eighth notes not surrounded by higher tones. You can see that that's kind of been ingrained in me, sitting in front of him for those years at Valdosta State. And that's how he was able to take a band of more or less average players at the college level with a few cornerstones and really develop an incredible ensemble. And we would warm up at the beginning of every jazz band rehearsal on phrasing. It was Willie Thomas's 9A and 9B. Ba-doo dot, ba-doo dot, ba-doo, 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 bop, where we would incorporate those accenting rules, and he wouldn't let us go on until it was exactly all together. And then we would move on into the literature and apply those things that we did in the warm-up. I think that's critical. The other thing is kids have to listen. It's all at their fingertips, but they have to be guided. You have to give them a list of players who they need to be listening to. They need to be listening to big band music. If they're playing in a jazz ensemble, they need to be listening to the larger ensemble idiom and not just their favorite player playing in a combo setting. You have to bring folks in to rehearse your band. Dick, I remember when you came into Douglas Anderson before we went to Midwest, and the first 5 things you said I had not even realized was going on. I came home and I told my wife, I said, I'm losing it, because Dick started off, and for like the first hour, I had been missing all of those things. I mean, I think you have to bring a different perspective in, and the kids learn from your guest, and the director certainly learns from your guest. And I think you have to bring in guest artists, because that helps to inspire, that helps to motivate your kids. It's one thing to hear them on YouTube. It's another thing to hear them standing 4 feet away from them. And I really do think that that is absolutely essential.
You have developed what is considered to be the ideal model. And not all schools obviously follow that model, but I've always believed that as well, that the concert band or the orchestra and the concert band are the core of the program. And from that, you go out. The differences, you've touched on a few of the differences between the symphonic band and jazz, and great explanation of the articulation. I think the other two areas that most guys miss is rhythm section and improvisation. Want to talk about those a little bit?
Absolutely. Rhythm section. So when I went to Valdosta State, by degree, I have a Bachelor in Music Education, of course, but there was a jazz education emphasis track that I was on. It was 28 other hours. Now, it would never fly today when they're reducing hours, but that's why another reason why I went to school there. And part of that was a 4-part course called Rhythm Section Techniques. And we had to play drums for a semester, and bass and guitar and piano with the right voicings. And we had to do that. And I'll tell you what, Greenhaw was very, very particular about us really being able to do that. And so you learn in a hurry some of the things immediately. And then he would bring in guests, people that played those instruments, and we would work with them. My senior year in college, we had Duffy Jackson with us the whole year. And so that was also the semester I was playing drums. And so Duffy was teaching me what to do with the hi-hat and the ride cymbal and where to strike it. And I cannot tell you how many times over my years of teaching, I have referred back to my rhythm section methods notebooks. Mm-hmm. Rich Madison had a whole thing of piano voicings that whenever I go and do an honor band or work as a clinician, I hand the piano players Rich's formulaic voicing thing, which is very similar to Frank Mantu's thing. Also, Jack Peterson, great jazz guitarist, had all the voicings figured out. I mentioned that Freddie Green has a website to students that I go and work with, and they don't know that. And on that website are all Freddie Green's voicings, namely deadening most of the strings to get that percussive string. As you have said, Freddie played a 6-string hi-hat. I use that a lot, Dick. That's beautiful. But yeah, the voicing. So you're exactly right. The rhythm section is always the biggest problem. When I did the clinic last year at Midwest, and I did the top 10 jazz band essentials, the very first thing I let off with was drum set integration, because that's a whole other thing. Setting up the band, unifying the band by gluing together the horn section with the rhythm section. It all comes through the drummer. And that was something that Duffy Jackson always talked about. And when you listen to the Clayton Hamilton Big Band, all of that is going through Jeff Hamilton. You listen to all those great bassy recordings. The drummer, Sonny Payne, one of the first great drummers we've ever had, that is exactly what he's doing, and that's the difference. And I found myself when I started doing a lot of judging, first thing I started talking about was that the drummer cannot just keep time, but the drummer has to integrate. And boy, once they start getting that going, it's a huge difference with their overall musical product. So yeah, the rhythm section is absolutely critical. So that's my background with that. And boy, I'm telling you, I am forever indebted to being able to go through that program at Valdosta State with Bob Greenhaw and learn a lot of those things like that.
That's a great experience to have. And
Awesome.
it really comes through quickly when people that have not had any jazz training begin to have a jazz band. They need information like that. And so
it got to be a point, Dick, where people thought I was a drummer.
no, I don't know about that, man.
and then the improv thing.
Wait a minute. I've heard you play saxophone. Let's talk about this.
Okay.
You've had an extensive career as a performer. Share with us about your career professionally on saxophone.
Okay. Well, I studied with Bob Greenhaw at Valdosta State. I was fortunate to have private lessons as a young student. My mom was paying $3 a lesson and made me practice. But for over 20 years, I was a per service player with the Jacksonville Symphony here in town. And during the 90s, the Savannah Symphony Orchestra was also very active. Of course, they went defunct about 2001, 2002. But I was traveling up to Savannah quite often playing with them. In 1995, I was made a Kyle Worth saxophone performing artist and clinician. And they sent me around the country doing things and had a great time doing that. Going back to my grandfather, he was a big Jimmy Dorsey fan. He would always tell me, listen to that Jimmy Dorsey. Of course, we know Jimmy Dorsey also influenced Charlie Parker. So that wasn't a bad way to be listening. But during the 1990s, I ended up being the lead alto player on the Jimmy Dorsey Ghost Band. Unfortunately, that happened just a few years after my grandfather passed away, because that would have been a thrill for him to know that his grandson was playing those Jimmy Dorsey solos. We had a band here for many years in town called the River City Band. And that's actually how Rich Madison ended up coming to Jacksonville to start the jazz program, as he was a guest artist with the River City Band. And I became a saxophone player in that band, along with many of the great players here in town, including Bill Prince, Bruce Silva, Ricky Kirkland, who played for a decade with Ray Charles. Jack Peterson played guitar. It was a phenomenal band. And we would do concert series. And one year we did a 4D concert series where brought in Della Reese, Dizzy Gillespie, Dave Brubeck, and Doc Severinsen. And boy, that was a lot of fun to be able to do that. To play Brubeck's concert music was incredible. And Doc Severinsen was incredible. That Tonight Show Volume 1 had already come out, but that Volume 2 had not come out yet. And so we actually programmed a bunch of those tunes from Volume 2, once he heard the level of the band, on our concert at the Florida Theater. So that was a thrill. Of course, I've played many years on the Jacksonville Jazz Festival with a lot of the acts that came through, New York Voices, Manhattan Transfer, Jack Sheldon, who was from Jacksonville, Dr. John, Diane Scher, just a lot of the folks. I'm very blessed, Dick, that I've been able to experience all of these things, because I will tell you that it's certainly not like it used to be anymore. It's not, and JB Scott and I talk about this all the time. We were very fortunate to have really caught just the right time in this stuff to play with some of the great legendary people.
Mm-hmm. Well, you sure are right about that. Let's go back and talk about the Douglas Anderson Jazz Band. You've played at many of the national music conferences throughout the years, GIN, Midwest, FMEA, and others. How important are those conferences and participation in the organization in improving your programs?
Oh my goodness. Yes, I've been very fortunate to take a number of different school bands to these conferences that you're speaking of. And I think the biggest thing is, I mean, not only the honor of representing a standard and really representing the band profession when you play at something like Midwest or IAJE, the old IAJE or Gen, but the progress that your kids make in preparing for that performance is absolutely unbelievable. And I have experienced that with the top band at UNF. I have experienced that with my community college band at Florida State Community College. I mean, and at Douglas Anderson. I mean, it's incredible the progress that is made. The kids are inspired. They are motivated. Their focus is incredible. And boy, I really, every time I seize the day with that, I take full advantage of that. Mm-hmm. And that really becomes our standard operational procedure. They've learned what it takes to really get ready for a performance like that. And it becomes our routine way of doing things. And I am so thankful for these conferences and for these opportunities because of that. The progress they make as people, the way they learn how to focus, their dedication, their commitment, their discipline, all of that stuff just becomes so enhanced. And that's why I'm a big believer in it. And that's why I try to do as many of these things as we can, because I know the benefits to students for sure. And then ultimately to your program. One of the things, a program like Douglas Anderson, where they had performed at DA many years prior, they had performed at Midwest many years prior. The kids really do feel like they're representing their program, their school, their community, their teachers, everything that came before them, and they want to leave their mark, and we hang up the pictures of the kids and the plaques that are received and all of that. And it becomes a real wall of honor for them. And when the newcomers come into the room and they see that, it really sets the tone as to what we do here is very serious. If we're going to do this, we are going to have a certain standard of excellence that we are going to aspire to. So even without me preaching on that, it just automatically happens. And yeah, it is absolutely vital. And again, the honor and the privilege of representing the profession and being showcased as the standard and being selected by committees with the gurus on those committees, and for the thought that they think your group is strong enough to perform on this national conference, it really is quite an honor. And I've been very blessed and fortunate for that. And again, forever thankful for all the opportunities. Yes.
The last 2 years have been different, to say the least, and have certainly brought their challenges. How did that work with you and your ensemble, and how did you overcome those challenges to maintain your program and maybe learn some new things through the process?
Well, we were with our Wind Symphony in Indianapolis, Indiana, at the National Concert Band Festival at Butler University. And we took buses up there, so it was a 2-day hike. And when we got there, that's just when everything started closing down. And we were supposed to perform on Saturday and be one of the showcase groups. And all of a sudden, the officials wanted us to perform on that Thursday night, which was only 3 hours from when we arrived. And we see why, because the governor in Indiana was one of the first ones to mandate the stopping of all events. So we performed that concert, and we were the last group that performed at that event. Then we got in the bus and headed back 31 hours immediately in the other direction. And we thought it was just going to last a week or two, right? I think that was the mindset for everybody. And boy, it became something much more than that. So in my school district here in Jacksonville, we went to the computer. Now, I have to tell you and Bob that it took me about a half hour to figure out how to load Zoom here. So I am not a technology guy at all. Music is one of the most archaic things that we have in society, and I am totally fine with that. So it was quite a learning curve for me to teach on the computer, and with the help of my wife, Lori, who's into all of this, she got me going. I found out about Flipgrid, which was a way for us to meet, and I could post things up with my theory classes. It was tough with the jazz ensemble, but what we did is we did group listening. We would have meeting times and we would do group listening, and they would fill out listening sheets for me. And we did a lot of discovering of a lot of different players. In terms of improv, I had them work on a lot of different patterns, and then they would pass those off to me via the Flipgrid. And believe it or not, that really helped a number of my students become quite proficient improvisers, was the fact that everybody had to get into it. There was no choice, because that was going to be our jazz ensemble grade. And those kids came through and they got serious about it. And they became very, very good improvisers. And it showed me that I need to be spending more time with that during jazz ensemble rehearsal, especially with the second band. So that's how I went about it. I went on YouTube and I figured out how to create all of these, I don't even know what they're called, but Don Zentz saxophone, Don Zentz trumpet, Don Zentz jazz big band. And the kids could go there, and I have compiled all these different clips that I think they should be listening to. I got into it and did it for all instruments, including classical trumpet, classical trombone. And because I got into it, it was cool. Once I figured out how to turn the computer on, I was okay with Lori's help. So those were some of the things I did. Now, fortunately, here in Florida, that went on like that until the end of the school year, from the beginning of March until the beginning of June. When we came back in the fall, Florida was pretty much opened up, and the kids had the option of still doing online learning or coming to school in our state and in our district. And of the 100 or so kids in our band program, we only had about a dozen kids that elected to stay home. Now, of course, we had all the hand sanitizer, we had masks, we had everybody stretched out at 6-foot intervals. Our band boosters bought us the air cleansing machines that they use over at Mayo. So we tried to set things up as absolutely as safe as we possibly could. My top jazz band was almost totally intact. It was a little weird rehearsing all around the room in Rich Madison's box, so to speak. But we did that. The kids that stayed home were some of the younger kids, and so it impacted my second band a little bit more. And some of the parents contacted me and said, we don't want Susie to come to school all day, but she really wants to participate in jazz band rehearsals. So what I started doing is I would have 2 evening rehearsals with the second jazz band. And the parents were okay with that because it was a smaller group. They weren't sitting in a small history class all on top of each other. And so we did a lot of that. And then by the time the second semester came along, we pretty much had everybody else back in pocket. So that's how I got through that. Boy, I hope we never have to do that again, because it was really rough. I know Lori trying to teach beginners online at her middle school band program was incredibly difficult. Mm-hmm. And we're gonna experience that setback, moving forward here. I think next year is the year everybody is worried about, because we lost that year or two.
Yeah, so true. So what's on the horizon for your DA ensembles? What are you looking forward to?
Well, we submitted for Jen, since it's going to be in Orlando. We hope that we'll be doing that. We should be finding out next week. And if we do that, we'll have Ernie Watts with us, as we had at Midwest. Ernie and I are good friends, and I love the way he plays. And we'll be doing one of his tunes called Joyous Reunion. I think that would be very appropriate. This is also the year where we bring in a guest artist. We do that every other year. And next spring, we're working on bringing in Terrell Stafford. If his schedule works out at Temple, because it's more toward the end of their semester, we'll be having him in. I also conduct the musical at Douglas Anderson, and they've decided that the show was going to be Chicago. So that's the core of that pit orchestra will be the jazz band. And the good thing about the musicals is that it really helps with the doubling with the saxophone players. And that's exactly how I learned how to double back when I was in high school, playing a musical every year. So we're looking forward to that, and just continuing to do what we do. You know, the kids get one pass, Dick. They get one pass through, and just to try to provide the very best possible experience for them. Putting 60, 70 hours a week into that band program to make it the very best it could be for them, and trying to give back some of the experiences that I was afforded when I was their age. I think that's kind of become who I am professionally. You know, when we talk about a job, I mean, it's a very special job to be able to do what you love and what you're so passionate about, as opposed to, my mother wanted me to be a CPA, a certified public accountant. I can't imagine my life if I was just doing that. So continuing to do those things to provide the best possible experiences. When the principal at DA hired me 8 years ago, she said, "Now, Don, you know, I'm not running a retirement home here." And I said, "You don't have anything to worry about in terms of that." And so that's been it. But I got to tell you, there are some days when I come home and I am exhausted. And part of that is because I'm not 35 years old anymore. To be 35 again, I'll tell you.
Oh, Don, this has just been a wonderful interview. I just can't begin to tell you how important this is as a segment of our Jazz Zone Together project. And for all you people listening, you better really hear this guy. And if you want somebody to come in and work with your band or judge at your festival, you don't have to look any further. Don Zentz is the guy.
Well, thank you.
So, Don, thank you so much. And it's just wonderful to be with you again.
Same here, Dick. Thank you. It's been an honor and privilege.
Thank you so much, Don. Just great information. To our viewers, thanks for joining us for this episode of Jazz Zone Together. Please check out our entire library of interviews. We know you'll find them all of real value to your program. Watch for updates as we're adding new interviews regularly.